for most lawyers, you're sitting down and your job is to help someone else understand the answer to their question and make them feel better. Make them say, I've been here. We've been here. You're in safe hands. Yeah. This is the place to come because we understand exactly what you're going through.
Welcome to Spill the Ink, a podcast by Reputation Inc., where we feature experts in growth and brand visibility for law firms and architecture, engineering, and construction firms. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Calcote King, your host and the principal and president of Reputation Inc. We're a public relations and content marketing agency for law firms and other professional services firms. To learn more, go to rep-inc, that's inc with a K.com. So when a business is facing a complex challenge, they do what we all do, head to Google to start researching solutions. What inevitably happens is hundreds of search results come up. While casting a wide net is great for getting the attention of a broad target audience, niche marketing can offer a greater competitive advantage in highly saturated markets. And for the sake of today's conversation, we're talking about law firms. This applies to other industries and professional services firms as well. So my guest today is Robert Ingalls. He's a strong believer that a key part of your firm's branding and marketing strategy needs to be niche focused. And I have to say, I strongly agree, and we'll get into that. We're also going to talk to Robert about his transition. He made the transition from his career as a litigation attorney, and then in 2017, he decided to change gears and use that expertise to found the company LawPods. So as a new-ish podcaster, I'm really excited to talk to you about podcasting and that strategy and how it works for law firms. So Robert, thanks for being on the show with me.
Hey, Michelle, thanks so much for having me. Anytime that somebody puts a microphone in my face and lets me talk is a good day for me.
Love it. So let's start with what LawPods is. So tell me about your journey to starting that.
Ooh, that's a big question. I was a litigation attorney. I initially went to law school, probably because I wasn't sure I wanted to be a big kid yet, but I'd also had a kind of a lifelong affair with just the pursuit of justice. I always found it very entertaining and certainly romanticized it. And the idea of helping people was really exciting to me. And so I went to law school, became a criminal defense attorney. That was always the path. And once I got there and I started practicing, I found out very quickly that it wasn't for me, that I am not built for that type of work. I am, people say attorneys have to compartmentalize. I don't have it. It's just not a muscle that I have. And it's not one that honestly, I think I care to develop.
Right.
I take my whole self with me everywhere I go. And that was really hard for me because the types of things I was doing every day, while completely ethical and the right thing and my job, they made me feel bad. I did not like what I was having to do and the way it made me feel. And it was incompatible with good mental health for me. And I discovered that pretty early. And from there, I jumped into just kind of general litigation, but I also kind of jumped into what lawyers will call door practice, whatever comes in the door. And that was not great because what is it? Jack of all trades, master of none.
Right.
I think we're probably going to get into that later in the conversation. But I just wasn't, I was stressed out all the time, overworked, very anxious. I didn't have a word for it at the time because I didn't, the idea of having mental health problems was other people.
What wasn't and I'm sure it wasn't the lexicon as much back then as well.
Not at all.
Right.
And the type of area I came from growing up, it wasn't something that you admitted to either. It was, it was a weakness. And so I'd never really thought much about it. And I thought this is just what life is. This is how life feels. And then we started, my wife came to me after we got married and kind of hit me with, I want to have a baby like now. And, up until that moment, that was tomorrow guy's problem. And all of a sudden it was like, someone might live here next year. And that really caused me in that moment and over the next couple of weeks to take stock of my life. And I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't be this person who is so stressed and anxious and just overwhelmed all the time. And so I started on a path of personal development, which I'd never been into before.
Yeah.
And that path of reading books in personal development led me to a podcast. And, the second podcast I listened to just, kind of went off, a light bulb went off for me.
What podcast was that?
It's defunct now, but it was called Awesome Office. And it was a great podcast, and it was about office culture. And I was running an office at the time. And so I was like, let me learn about this. And the guest was a guy named Tom Bilyeu, founder of Quest Nutrition. He's now gone on to found Impact Theory. Very good podcast, personal development. And we've all heard this so many times in our life that it's trite. You can be anything you want. You can do anything you want. This is the first time I heard it, because that was the thrust of the message. You can be anything you don't have to do what you're doing. You can stop it now and do something else. And I heard it. I think I can be anything I want. I don't have to keep doing this. And that just gave me license in that moment to get outside of the kind of that tunnel vision I had and explore. And I think I told you before we got on that I 30 days after I listened to my first podcast, I bought this microphone. The medium resonated so deeply with me that, two people could sit down and have a conversation a world apart, and it could be valuable to me.
Yeah. How cool
years
that you're
later.
Doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like somebody right now is listening to this podcast probably 2 years from today when we recorded it.
Right. Yep.
And they're going to, hopefully get value from it, because we took the time here to sit down, have this conversation, put it out where people could hear it. And then it's kind of got that evergreen status where people can continue to interact with it. So that's the short story of how I got where I am.
So much of what you just said resonates. I often tell clients, marketing allows you to take control of your firm in terms of creating a brand to attract the kinds of clients you want, and I don't think a lot of lawyers have thought through that. I'll give you an example. A lawyer will often tell me, oh, well, all our business comes from referrals. We don't get it. And I said, well, you've never done marketing. Of course, all your businesses come from referrals. Right. So until you start engaging in that and defining an ideal client and ideal business and then marketing for it, you don't understand the power that has to really kind of create the kind of practice that you want. And marketing is critical to that. I love how you said that. And I also, podcasting for me has been such a value add as well. I've enjoyed every minute of it. And it's not just from the content creation, it's the relationships you build. Have you found that as well?
Yes. I mean, when I first started, that was the biggest thing that was unanticipated for me, but for my clients as well. They overwhelmingly say the network effect of the podcast has been one of the most valuable things that they didn't even come in seeing as a potential ROI.
Yeah.
And they're having conversations with people like we're having right now. We're getting to know each other in real time right now. Yep. And they're having these conversations with people they otherwise might not be having conversations with, connecting with. And those people turn into potentially referral sources, potentially clients, potentially friends, and certainly a member of your network, which there's always value in that. And then the relationships you make from the listeners that you connect with. People listen, they start to follow you, they start to reach out to you, you start to connect with them. I have become a guest on numerous shows that I started out as a listener, and I was like, this is really good information. And then I started to think, I think I have something of value to add to this conversation. And now I'm a guest on the show, and now I'm developing relationships. Now I have referral agreements with some of these people. And it all starts from just this beautiful medium that we're engaging in right now. That's why I went all in. That's why when I left my career, I started building this company. And, I took a corporate America job just to pay for the kids I now have, and started building the company because it was early, but I believed in it. I saw how powerful it was, and all of these things we're talking about. And I think the market's kind of proving me out here, because
absolutely.
every year we see that staircase go up.
Yeah. And COVID, I would say probably definitely helped. So I hesitated getting into podcasting because I thought I don't have more to share than what's already out there. There's all these sort of legal marketing and PR podcasts. So I thought I'm not going to add anything new was what I hesitated. And then I talked to a consultant, a company that does a similar that manages podcasts and produces podcasts for companies. And he talked me through the networking value and to view it as a networking tool, to view it as to have a good reason to. Sorry, my dog is walking around in the background. She's my Velcro dog, so I can't push her out while I do these. But he really coached me around thinking about it as a networking tool first and foremost. And once I did that and shifted that, I'm still producing great content, but I'm making connections in a way that is really simple, but also has like a lot of added value. So that was kind of a light bulb moment for me. So tell me, so when you talk to law firms, we've kind of just covered it, but do you give them any other reasons about why a podcast? Because as we know, both working with lawyers, they're busy people. They've got the billable hours to meet. Talk me through the value proposition that you give them.
I mean, the first one that we usually discuss is when people are showing up on your website, they have questions. And for a lot of my clients, I have a lot of trial lawyers. When people show up on their website, something bad happened to them or someone they care about. And they're there not to learn about you per se. You're not the hero of their story.
Right.
They're there to get answers
about their problem. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Right. That's why we're making all of the content we've been making. That's why SEO companies will never go out of business for at least until they figure out how to beam stuff into our brain, I guess. And we're creating content to answer questions. And that is usually, depending on the type of law firm, but that is usually the first thing we're thinking about is they ask, you answer. Now let's answer in a way that could perhaps provide more value because we write all of this content. It's very good. It's helping drive people to our site, but people don't love to sit and read content. And videos are good. I like videos a lot. I think that there's a very good place for them, but audio has exploded.
Yeah.
I believe because it does something that no other form of marketing can do. It sells you time. It doesn't say stop and read. It doesn't say look over here and watch. It says, what are you about to do? I'll come with you.
Right.
You can learn, you can be entertained, you can gather information and on your own schedule from your own app. You don't have to sit on my website and use the rudimentary players that a browser allows you. You can tap one button, leave the website, go to your podcast player, to my show, where everything you could ever want to know about your problem lives.
Yeah.
Right. So you have another problem, just scroll through your feed. That is also something. And I know they have that problem because I've been in thousands of consultations. I've heard every possible angle of a question asked to me. I've also worked on my SEO. So I know what people are typing before they land on my site. I know what they're typing before they land on my competitor sites. I know what they want to know. And so I'm creating content that when someone does land on my website, that will nurture them, that will cause them to get that know, like, trust that we want, that is going to get past that friction point of getting them to pick up the phone.
Yeah. Well, and I love how you say that we're producing a piece of content that is giving time, that's respecting how busy people are and how they like to consume information. But what I found too about podcasting is it's an easier medium for the creator as well. Do you find that? And is that part of how you coach law firms?
100%, because that's one of the biggest objections we get is I don't have time for a podcast. And it's one of those things I've told this story in presentations, but I had a call with a law firm owner and they were in a very niche area and he had two objections. One was, I don't have time. Two was my niche is saturated. People are already doing it. And so perhaps, right? These two, both of these things could be true. Sure.
Yep.
maybe in theory. And so I did a little research after the call, went onto his website. He was creating a lot of articles and writing a lot of blogs, also creating a lot of YouTube content. You know, a lot of it was just like, look at all these books. But still, that takes time and energy to create.
Yep, absolutely.
And then when you look at the saturation point, there were 2 other podcasts in his niche. It was super and niche. I never know where to go with that. I will fluctuate as this conversation goes.
Yeah, I do the same.
And 2, and that was saturation to him. And for me, the idea that someone else is already doing a podcast about my practice area, and that means I shouldn't do one, that blows my mind, because I see that the same way as somebody saying, well, they already have a website. Why would I have a website?
Yeah.
Why would you want someone educating your prospects on their podcast?
Yeah.
You think they're going to listen to their podcast and then call you? No, they developed a relationship with that firm now. And I think some people think about their podcast as kind of like Joe Rogan as well. I'm going to make a podcast about something somebody will want to listen to while they're mowing the grass on Saturday. That's not the reality for a lot of people. And I don't think it's the angle you should be pursuing.
Right.
You are speaking to a specific problem.
Right.
That's usually what you're trying to do. You're talking about something that people want to know about. They don't really want to be entertained. There's a lot of really good entertainers out there. And if you're that good that your law firm podcast can be entertaining, it's time to switch areas. It's time to go in entertainment. And so the idea that somebody else is already doing it, I shouldn't do it, is, I think that's misguided.
Yeah.
And then there was, I'm trying to remember the other, I had a number 2, and
we're talking about how easy they are to, how easy they are compared to, yeah, exactly.
Thanks for throwing me a life raft there.
Yeah.
and then the time commitment, I think, I mean, you hit on it. It ends up being significantly smaller than any other type of content creation. Yeah. Because especially if you're working with a team, your job really is to sit down in front of the microphone. It's a USB microphone that you just plug into your computer. It's not a lot of fancy gear anymore. This stuff is streamlined. You sit down, you have a conversation, you walk away. That's it. Yeah. Like most lawyers that have a podcast, that's the extent of their involvement in the podcast, because you're not sitting down creating content that is unique, really. For the most part, you're not sitting down and creating NPR content that has to go from here to here and create a unique and compelling hooking story. You're creating content about things you are already the expert in. You're talking about things you know about. Like when you got me on this call, I didn't have any expectation. Like I didn't prepare for this. We're having a conversation about something I understand deeply.
Exactly. Why would you, do an interview about something that you don't know well enough to just speak casually about?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Now, if I, depending on the type of content you're making, sure. But for most lawyers, you're sitting down and your job is to help someone else understand the answer to their question and make them feel better. Make them say, I've been here. We've been here. You're in safe hands. Yeah. This is the place to come because we understand exactly what you're going through. It's a tough position that you're in. We've done it before. Here's some of our clients that have been through it, and just getting them to that point that they feel comfortable with you. And the amount of time that takes is infinitely smaller than trying to sit down and put 1,500 words on a page.
Absolutely.
Or try to get dressed up and take 1,000 cuts for a video that you want to put on YouTube.
Yeah. We are a content creation firm and PR firm for law firms. So, when you're producing written content, the amount of, editing by committee that lawyers will do, lawyers are word people. So the tinkering of little words, the debates over Oxford commas, right, well, they all do. So whereas podcasting takes that away, takes away that whole process of that tinkering with the words and the back and forth. And I liked what you said about entertaining. I've always had a bit of a dislike for podcasts where they don't jump into the meat of the conversation, and there's just this banter, and there's, and I'm thinking I'm not getting any value, because when I go into a business podcast, I want value, I want to learn something very quickly. So I've stayed away from that myself as a podcaster. I don't have a co-host that I sit there and chit chat about the weather with. I get into it immediately. Do you advise your attorneys similarly? It sounds like you do with that. We're not trying to compete with Joe Rogan.
Right. 100%. And, but I also do balance that with bringing yourself to the podcast. But I don't think that bringing yourself necessarily means a bunch of chit chat, especially in the beginning. I think it means weaving stories in there that humanize you, that let them know, like, you're not talking at them, you're talking with them. And you can very much mention that you had a terrible golf outing on Saturday, just weave in your life. And that's very simple. Very simple is maybe the wrong word. That comes naturally for a lot of lawyers. We are trained storytellers. And even for the ones of us that didn't go into trial work, we still learned how to craft a narrative. Our first year of law school, that was a big thing, persuasion. We learned how to communicate with other people. And it's just kind of natural communication. Just bring yourself out, tell some stories that make you a little bit more relatable. But the chit chat itself, just the nonsense, that kind of stuff, I highly advise against. And it's one of those things, it when you hear it, because I've listened to podcasts. Somebody will say, oh, you should listen to this podcast. And I'll listen. In the first 5 minutes, I don't even know what the episode's going to be about.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm sure that's endearing for people who have developed a relationship with that show. And so maybe it's the kind of show that's just how it is. It's this long show that goes on for a really long time, and people aren't just showing up to get information. They're showing up to feel like they know the host. Perfect. If that's what your show's about, great. That is almost never what a show that I work with is going to be about right now, because people show up to lawyers like they show up to plumbers. You don't even think about them until you know them.
Right.
Something happened. Something happened. My house is flooded. What do I do? That is how lawyers, plumbers shouldn't be approaching their content with a lot of fluff. Something, water is rising, get to the point.
Right. Yeah.
And that's how I think lawyers should be approaching their content.
Yeah. So when you talked about, look, the extent of the lawyer's involvement is getting on getting a microphone, plugging it in, and having a conversation. Tell me about the work that you do behind the scenes to kind of make that happen. Are you assisting them with outreach and finding the right guests? Talk to me about that a little bit.
Sure. I mean, really, to answer it, all of it, it really is our commitment is you do the talking, we do the rest. And we learned that over years in business of how do we make this, how do we lower the commitment as best we can while still delivering an exceptional product. And we've discovered that really lawyers are in a position to show up, talk, walk away, and we can do the rest. And so it starts with crafting the strategy for their show. We start on day one with who is our target listener. A lot of podcasts that I start to work with that exist already, even at really big firms, have never answered that question.
Wow.
They just started, I know, and they just started talking about something they thought was interesting without thinking who would listen. Who are we making this for? Because every time you make a content decision, it's very arbitrary if you're not making it with your listener in mind, our goals in mind. What's our long-term goal? How does this become revenue? And so that's one of the first things we do is who are we doing this for? Why are we doing it? We work with a lot of PI firms. They're not all created equal. And what areas are you focusing on?
Right.
Because, some PI firms will have 50 different tabs as far as like we do med mal, we do car accidents, we do truck accidents. And is there one of those that you're doing the best with? Or is there one that you really want to hammer? Like there's one that you really want to get into. That's where you want to live. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Maybe that's a good idea. Maybe we make content. We have a Utah attorney that we're working with who does PI all over, but we have a truck accident podcast. That's what our podcast is about, trucking accidents.
Love it.
And so we want to think about that kind of stuff. What's the strategy? Who is it? Because we have some attorneys that we work with they are much more interested in referrals. They handle catastrophic injuries.
Right.
And they get almost all of their work from other attorneys who took the case and said, we need help with this.
Right.
And so their podcast is created for attorneys.
Yeah.
It is an educational tool that attorneys in their target referral market would want to listen to, that would be valuable for them. And then it's branded by the firm. Hey, while you're here, if you have something going on like this, send it to us. We'd love to work with you on it. And so their podcast is referral. And so that's the kind of conversation we have up front, is just creating that strategy on why are we doing it? Who are we doing it for? Setting ourselves up for long-term success. And then from there, it goes, we're going to do voiceover intros and outros with professional voice actors. So when people show up to your podcast, it doesn't sound like they recorded it in a wind tunnel. It sounds professional, because just like your website, when somebody shows up to any of your content and it's bad, it reflects poorly upon you. And the podcast is the same way. And so we want to make sure that when they first listen, it's got a nice soundtrack. It's got good voiceover, that your microphones are good. We're going to ship you microphones to make sure that you are getting good sound. You should be able to record in your office, at home, in Fiji, as long as you have a good Wi-Fi connection. And people really shouldn't be able to hear the difference from the conversation we're having right this second if you have the right microphone. But people will often buy the wrong microphone that they think is good. And so we solve that problem by shipping them a microphone.
Just doing it. Yeah.
Just doing it. It's things we've learned along the way as business owners. And then we set up a calendar for them. They find a time that works. They hop on. We're on the call with them. We check their sound levels, check their guest levels, press record. They have a conversation while we're in the background, and then they hang up, and that's it. We edit, audio engineer, cut the video up into a video podcast for YouTube that's optimized with keywords. We write show notes. We post it to their blog, post it to YouTube, post it to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere the podcasts go. We also cut it up into pieces of micro content, into little short video clips on branded templates with captions that people will actually engage with on social media, and then post those things to their social accounts as well. So it's really getting that entire content marketing strategy from sitting down and talking for 20 minutes.
Love it. That trucking example was a perfect, segue to, because I do want to talk to you a little bit about niche marketing. It's what we initially planned, but I'm so fascinated with podcasting right now, because we started it last year and did it for about a year. And I had to take a little bit of a break with it. I'm just getting back with it, but it was just such a great network builder and all these other benefits that you've just mentioned. That I'm just a real fan of the medium. But let's talk about niche marketing in where you think that falls in terms of strategy for law firms. How are you advising firms in terms of finding a niche? Because, when I first started working with law firms, there was a joke about law firms, because branding law firms was always the most difficult thing, because the joke was, this is just a bunch of professionals that the only thing they have in common is the shared HVAC system in the building that they're, working in. Because as a brand person, it's, you're looking for, what's that unique value proposition. And often these full service law firms really kind of formed because of geography, they served a geography. And as, things have changed with, obviously COVID was a big shift, but it was already happening with the internet. People are looking for exact experts in their exact problem. So how are you advising firms with that?
It's something that comes up frequently, and more so for us with medium-sized firms. And that is a lot of times how they formed is people came together. They did this. Well, let's just pool our resources. And then they became a firm. And like any other business, it is really difficult to establish yourself and scale when you do a lot of things, especially if you do those lots of things, lots of different ways. And, if you go to a networking event and you meet 4 different people, You meet one that does divorces for high value men. That's what they do. They told you, they introduced themselves. I handle divorce proceedings for men that have significant resources. And okay, that's perfect. And then you meet another one who does estate planning. Okay. All right. Then you meet another one who does personal injury, some criminal defense. They'll do a will for you as well, but nothing too complicated. It's all these things. And so then somebody comes in and they ask for something. If they come and ask me for estate planning, I'm not going to send them to that person because I don't know what that person, the wills, but not too complicated. And by doing all of those different things, it can be really difficult to brand yourself.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you can't make a good living. Having practiced for a long time, I know a lot of attorneys that are making 80 to 150,000 practicing that kind of law. And for a lot of people, I think that that's very good income and they're very happy with it. I mean, most of those people I know work really, really hard to cover that. And, or maybe hard's the wrong word. They work a lot of hours.
Right.
And the potential to scale that is really difficult because it's hard to systematize it.
Right.
It's very difficult.
You're not repeating processes. Yeah. It's not only a great marketing strategy, it just makes your life easier.
Yeah. And there's
what I tell people.
Right. There's an excellent book, and it's focused on agencies, but the framework applies everywhere. It's called Built to Sell. And it's about building a company in a way that it's actually a business. Because if you leave your desk for a week as the owner of the company and things start to break, you don't own a company.
Right.
You own a
You're
job.
right. You're a glorified freelancer. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You own a job because nothing continues to happen. And on my side, I think a lot about that. I can, my company's not huge yet, but I can disappear for days before anyone really would notice. And that's how it needs to be.
It's a fabulous feeling, isn't it? When you realize you've gotten there. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think any business owner needs that. Yeah. Like you need systems and processes that are repeatable, that when something happens, everyone knows what to do. Yeah. You aren't, I read a book where he called it fire killing. He's like, your job as a business owner is not to be a fire killer. Your entire day becomes putting out fires for everyone. Everyone's at your door, do that. And it makes you feel important because everyone needs you and you're busy. You're so busy. And we feel like busy translates into value, which it definitely does not. And by having the type of thing when you're in a niche, and I think PI firms, maybe I work with a lot of them, but I feel like they do it the best of most of the firms I've seen. They have these systems, they have these processes. There's usually one partner who doesn't even practice anymore. He's the face. He's the marketer. His entire job is to tell the story. Then you've got the chief litigator whose entire job is to be really, really good at driving cases. They work up the cases under him. They bring them to him when it's time to go to bat, and he takes them and runs with them. And then you've got the associate who does this. You've got the intake team at these firms. It's huge. You'll see 4 attorneys, and then you'll look and there's 15 support staff. Yeah. I love that because they're creating a system where the attorneys aren't filing paperwork. Right. The attorneys aren't drawing a lot of like boilerplate stuff up. They've got an entire system from the moment a client picks up the phone and comes through their system, like everyone knows exactly what they're supposed to do next. And that's really hard to do if you're doing multiple things. Yeah. I feel like I kind of got sidetracked with like the business.
No. That because I'm a big proponent of it from both of those sides. It makes your business run more effectively. But what you were describing at the beginning of that was there's a concept about mental availability, right? The world is so much more complex. We're given so much more information. We have so much more information available. So the simpler the message, the more easy it is to recall it. So when a attorney says to you, I do a little of this, a little of that, a little of that, you're not going to remember, he's the guy to go to for this friend of mine who is high net worth and is getting a divorce, Right. So it's really risen because of, the internet age and how much information we have now. And you've got to simplify your brand in order to kind of cut through.
Yeah. And it's the ability to get out in front of people in the marketplace with that simple message of I do this and I do it well. And that's it. This is who I am. This is what I do. It is really easy for people to recall. It's really easy for people to refer to you.
Mm-hmm.
And any market you go to right this moment, we could drop ourselves in Iowa,
Mm-hmm.
and it would take us within an hour, we would know who the PI people in town are.
Right.
Just from
Absolutely.
driving around, just from watching television. And they're hammering, this is who we are and this is what we do. They're not trying to draw up your will for you. They're not trying to do these other things. And that's why that a firm that is practicing like that is almost always going to be more successful in their ability to scale and turn a profit, because it's a lot easier to make a profit when you're able to systematize, when you're able to automate a lot of things. There's going to be less errors. There's going to be less need for as many people. And I mean, at the end of the day, I know we're here to help people. And a lot of attorneys, I think, we're driven to the profession to help people. We can't help people if we are not making a profit. We have to take care of our needs. We've got to do what makes us feel fulfilled in order to even show up. So we've got to get those profits. And I think that some attorneys are still struggling with that. And that's an area I love to help people when I can.
Wonderful. Well, I have really enjoyed this conversation. It's kind of touched on things that I'm really passionate about. So I appreciate you kind of taking the time and leading us through it. So we have been talking to Robert Ingalls of LawPods. So if people want to get to know you better, what's the best thing? Where's the best place for them to go?
I mean, I spend most of my time on LinkedIn. So, if you go there, you can find me, Robert Ingalls. There's not too many of us. I think I'm the only one with any involvement in podcasting. But if you type LawPods in any search engine, whether it be Instagram or Google or anywhere, you're going to find us. And so feel free to reach out, lawpods.com, and email me directly if you'd like, robert@lawpods.com.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Spill the Ink, a podcast by Reputation Inc. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.